Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews Saturday Conversation Show, an interview series where I talk to entertainment personalities, content creators, and filmmakers about their work and love of film. Today's guest is Paul Shirey, US Army veteran, entertainment journalist, accomplished artist, and content creator who runs the Arctic Ninja Network on YouTube and Way of the Shirey on Substack, which links of which you can find in the show notes. A man of many talents and invaluable experience, Paul has long been and continues to be a vital voice in the pop culture sphere. And I'm happy to say that Paul is joining me right now on the Saturday Conversation series. How are you, Paul?
I'm great and happy to be here. So I appreciate you bringing me on.
And I appreciate very much you coming on. And before we begin, I just want to say thank you very much for your service. I know you've done tours of Iraq and Afghanistan back in the 2000s. So I just want to say that first of all before we begin. I want to
Thank
just
you.
go back a bit in regards to what your movie diet was like, or for your first kind of exposure to films when you were younger. What was the first time you remember films came into your life? Was it cinema? Was it, well, for myself, it was VH. I'm pretty sure it was VHS first and then cinema later. Was it this kind of same for you, or did you have another kind of trajectory there?
Well, I think in terms of like pop culture, the initiation into that, I think if we really roll it back, I think it started with cartoons, like Saturday morning cartoons and things like that, G.I. Joe, Transformers, all of that. I think that was kind of the initial indoctrination, if you will, into that realm of fantasy and art and all that stuff mixed together. And then that led to comic books. And up until that point, of course, I liked movies and I like anybody, but I think the I can pinpoint exactly when film became an art to me, and that was uh, a little movie called Revenge, directed by Tony Scott. Um, I would see it on HBO late at night. I'm gonna show my age here. There's no streaming services. There's VHS tapes and whatever you could catch, scheduled on TV. And I saw this movie, Revenge, with Kevin Costner, and Anthony Quinn, Madeline Stowe. And I was just fascinated with how it looked. That smoky, extreme close up, quick cut, the beauty and artistry that is Tony Scott, right? So I remember seeing Revenge, right? And I was like, man, I love this movie. There was so many things about it. It was hard to pinpoint, but I loved it. I just loved the way it looked. Like the way you would love a painting or anything. You would be like, I can't really describe it. I just love it. A few weeks after I had watched Revenge, or maybe it was a few days, I don't recall, Top Gun was on TV.
Mhm.
And I started watching Top Gun, and it's, that visual language that's kind of like unlocked in your brain. And I'm watching Top Gun, and I'm like, why does this feel so familiar? Everything about this movie feels familiar. And I'm trying so hard to figure it out, and I couldn't. And it really was like a moment of revelation as I'm like, well, what does this have in common with Revenge? Like, what does this have in common with something else I've seen? And so there was no internet, again, showing my age. So I went to the bookstore, and there used to be this giant Bible of a book. And I can't even remember the exact name. It was like the movie dictionary or whatever, movie guide. And
Mhm.
it cross-referenced, had a list of every movie ever made. And it in the back, it had a section for it all linked to directors, cast. And so I went straight to Revenge and I saw directed by Tony Scott. And then you can go back and you can say, okay, what else did he direct? And it gives you a whole list of everything he's ever directed. And like, there's Top Gun. And then I started connecting the dots and I'm like, Last Boy Scout, all these different movies. And I'm like, holy crap, this is an artist that's making these movies. He has a visual language, a visual style. And to me, I was like, this is amazing. And that just opened the floodgates for me because then I was obsessed. I was like, okay, what are my other favorite movies? So I started looking at other favorite movies: Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, and I'm like, John McTiernan, holy crap, I'm a John McTiernan fan. Predator, Die Hard, holy, this was amazing. And so from there, it just continued to snowball. And I was just obsessed. I was in that book every time I watched a movie. I would look up who directed it, like everything that I could learn about it. And that was it. that was the end of it, and it's been that way ever since. Rather than having that movie book now, now I use IMDb. I can honestly say I am on IMDb every single day. There is not a day that goes by that I don't open the IMDb app to cross-reference something, to discover something about a movie or TV show. Even if it's the most minuscule thing, like who is that actor? I can't think of their name. And then it's like, oh yeah, they were also in that.
Hmm.
Or the score or the cinematography or whatever. Um, it continues to unfold. So that's where it began, and that's what's ultimately led to where we are now, or where I am now.
Did you find any type of artistic voices in the comic books that were kind of similar in a way that influenced you in a way that Tony Scott did? I remember when I used to collect comic books when I was a kid, Mike Deodato Jr., Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, those were the type of guys that really kind of spoke to me in regards to illustrations. Any comic book illustrators that really kind of spoke to you in a way that Tony Scott did with movies?
Yeah, I would say, well, initially, the first artist that really struck out to me that where I was just like, wow, this is amazing was Will's Portatio in Punisher #8 of
Hmm.
the regular series. I remember a friend of mine had purchased that comic and he brought it over and he showed it to us. And I remember it was me, my brother, and my friend, and we're just poring over this book. Like we're studying it like we've never seen. And like the violence was pretty intense. It's a Punisher book. And we were just like, wow, like look at this. This is amazing. So Will's was one of the early ones. And then, Jim Lee started working on Punisher War Journal. That was one of his earliest works. I believe he came onto that right after Alpha Flight. And man, Jim Lee's Punisher War Journal run is one of the most overlooked, understudied aspects of his comicography. Like it is an amazing run, and that was hugely influential to me. I've always been more interested in the grounded, kind of realistic, I guess you could say, action movie aesthetic. I like fantasy. I like, I love the X-Men and all the other fantasy books too. But I've always been drawn more to the grounded, more realistic, action-rific kind of comics. And I think that kind of it correlates with my love of filmmakers like Tony Scott, John McTiernan, in those early days and up till now. But I think that is ultimately where it began was with Wills, and then it just snowballed. Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, of course. Rob Liefeld takes a lot of shit in terms of his style, but there's
Hmm.
nobody else like Rob Liefeld. There's plenty of copycats, and there's plenty of people that will criticize Rob's work, and even sometimes I'll look at his some of his work and I'm like, oh God, that's just I don't really like that. And then you'll see other stuff, you're like, wow, it's still really good. The great thing about Rob is that he stayed true to who he is. Like stayed true to his style, and he is by far the most successful modern comic book creator in the industry. Um, you look at somebody that's created everlasting characters that have translated from comic to film with Deadpool, with Cable, with all of these characters. Um, he's unmatched. He's unmatched in that way. But there is a cavalcade of artists, and we could do a whole podcast of artists that I love. Guys like Paul Gulacy, he was a huge influence. I loved his work and still love his work. James O'Barr, whom I just recently finally met. His Crow comics could just what an impact. Like I should be buried with my Crow graphic novel that I have signed by him because that book I have like thumbed through that, read it, studied it so many times over. I just have such a deep respect for what he did as an artist. And then I would say I can't not mention Frank Miller.
Hmm.
Uh, Frank Miller is, I think, to me, I don't like to give to make deities out of creators, but Frank Miller is kind of the comic book god, I guess, in that sense. Like his work, you think about how far reaching his work has gone, not just in terms of transitioning from page to screen or just being a tremendous influence, not just to me, but to other creators. You'll hear guys like Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee and all these creators, we all kind of bow to the Frank Miller standard that he set for the industry. He was a breakout artist and creator and writer. I mean, how many times has The Dark Knight Returns been referenced, remade, turned into an animated series? Zack Snyder pulling, stuff from it for his films. You just you can't under, you can't understate how essential Frank Miller's work is, to me and to the industry as a whole.
You mentioned Revenge was something you saw on HBO. Do you remember the first movie you saw in cinemas? Do you have any memories of that, or or films you saw in cinemas?
I mean, flipping back, I'll just ramble off as many as I can remember here, from the early days. I remember seeing The Goonies.
Hmm.
I remember we had to sit in the very front row because we arrived late to the theater, and it was one of those, watching the movie like that. And then
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been in that situation.
Oh
It's
yeah.
awful,
Yeah.
but you find that you quickly adjust, like the human ability to adapt very quickly uh, works when you're sitting in the very front row. So I remember seeing the Goonies like that. Um, I remember seeing Empire Strikes Back. I remember Return of the Jedi in '83, and I remember I kept going back. I was obsessed with Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. I wanted to be Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. Um, like what a tremendous influence. And when I would, you go to the toy store to buy a new, like, oh, you can get an action figure. If they had Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, even if I had five of them, I would get another. It
Hmm.
was like, I gotta get another one. It made no sense, but that was just the way I was. Um, but let's see what else. I remember seeing Rain Man. I remember seeing Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. I remember seeing Temple of Doom. I remember going to Temple of Doom with a bunch of friends, and one of their older sisters came with us, and she kept freaking out at every one of the like gory sequences, like the dinner sequence,
Oh
and she
yeah.
kept running out of the theater, and we were running out with her and then going back in and running out and go because I mean, Temple of Doom changed everything in terms of ratings.
Hmm.
It led to the creation of the PG-13. um but yeah, I vividly remember that, and I guess now I understand, uh to a great extent, why they would change the ratings in that point. Um, but yeah, I remember seeing '89 Batman. Oh my God, the
Yeah.
atmosphere of seeing '89 Batman on opening day in a packed theater, like that is the great stuff of movies. That is the great stuff of going to have a theatrical experience where you have an audience where everybody is so excited to see what this is. And I've experienced it again, and I'm positive that you have. You're like an Avengers Endgame kind of level, like this is it. That's what I felt at Batman '89. And I was what, 12 years old, and I just remember we were just you could feel like the vibration in the theater of everybody with the anticipation of watching this movie. So, there's many experiences like that, in the early days. Seeing Predator, seeing I saw Die Hard 14 times in the theater. Back
Mm.
when you don't have a job and you have you know that easy income to just hop into a movie and spend that time. I was obsessed with Die Hard, which frequently I say is my all-time favorite movie. I think it's the perfect action film. I've not seen an action film better since. So, uh, yeah, I still stand by that.
I always say to my kids, they're aged 12 and 9. And so they've grown up, they've practically been raised on like in this superhero movie era, right? With like every year,
Right.
like anywhere between 6 to 12. And I always say to them how lucky they are that they're living in a time where there's the filmmakers and the technology and the resources to pull these adaptations from the comics to the screen. Because I said to him, I was like, you guys have no idea. I had to wait until I was like 8 years old, and that's when the first Batman came out. And your uncle told me, took me, and your other uncle, we went to it together to see it. It's the first time I saw, because at that time the only Batman I ever saw like that wasn't in comics was like the Adam West. They had the reruns
Yeah,
on
yeah.
TV here in Australia. I was like, you have no idea how big that was. I mean, I was obsessed with that film when it came out. And same with the 1990 Ninja Turtles when that came out as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? So
Ninja
which
Turtles.
I
God, that
still
was
think
huge.
which I still think is the best of those movies.
100%.
And my kids love that movie
100%.
as well, which is great. Yeah, so many good times back then because I think girl because I know I'm spoiled now because I'm sure maybe in some ways you might feel the same that when you're part of the entertainment film journalist collective, you get free screenings and you get to see a lot
Yeah.
of films and all that. But I still remember just back in the day how much of an event it was to see movies. I think the first movie I saw, and I get my memories jumbled up, it was either Crocodile Dundee Part 2 or Short Circuit. It was one or the other.
Oh man,
Um,
both
but that for
classics.
both classics, and I remember the first experience of just watching this stuff, and ever since then has just been this love affair with going to the films. It's not only just watching movies like at home, but it's like going to the cinema and watching
Yeah.
stuff there. But yeah, always remind my kids they're very lucky to be able to just be able to go with dad to watch what did we watch not long ago. um wasn't Transformers one. I was trying. Oh, Red One. We watched that, which was okay. But yeah, it's like you don't know how lucky you are. Like I got this easy access because back then it was very rare indeed to go to the movies. So yeah, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
fantastic to think back and look at it because I think those memories of just being in a darkened room and watching these images come to life in front of you are just fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
it's and you look at the like kids today. I look at my son, he's 15, and I drag him to the movies,
mm,
even still, but and he's been raised that way, but the audience is changing. Kids are used to this kind of quick hit dopamine rush of, doom scrolling and YouTube, endless, videos of people playing video games for hours on
yeah,
end. And
yeah.
like this, the whole dynamic is shifting. And I don't like to be like a Debbie Downer kind of person and be like, oh, well, the theatrical experience is dying, but it's kind of dying. And it's guys like us, and our peers and other people that love cinema that keep it alive. And I really fully believe with all my heart that the theatrical experience, being in a theater with strangers, experiencing this film, is the best way to experience a movie. I watched Black Hawk Down on Veterans Day. I was like, I'm gonna watch a war movie for Veterans Day, which I'm glad I got to that place that I can do that. But I was watching Black Hawk Down. Phenomenal. Looks great on my 4K TV. It's great, but I remember seeing it in theaters, and that was a different
Mm.
experience because you're around people that are reacting, that are feeling these emotions. And in my perspective, I believe that we as human beings that our spirits and our aura, I feel like it spreads. I don't think that we are these singular individuals that are just like, locked up in a vacuum. I believe that the collective experience of everybody's mind being in the same zone at the same time, it makes for something magical. And I think that the theatrical experience is really truly the best way to experience a movie. I love watching movies with people. I'll watch movies by myself frequently, but man, I so much enjoy the experience so much more when I have people around me reacting and asking questions or being curious or, seeing things within the movie that are like, oh, that was cool or that was cool. And maybe something I never noticed or I never cared about or never saw from their perspective. And I think that is why, the theatrical experience is so great, is because you truly do bring people together to experience this art.
It's that thing where, like, if you're watching a comedy and someone laughs at the same time that you laugh, or watching a horror movie and there's a gasp and yeah, gasp, it's a reminder of the similarities that we have with one another as opposed
Yes.
to the differences. And you're right, it's a collective energy that is
Yeah.
shared in that room, in that darkened room where we're watching something. That's why the number one thing that kind of irritates me when I go to the movies, and it could just be me being getting turning into an old cranky old man, but one of my pet peeves is when people intentionally laugh during a movie that isn't meant to be a moment to be laughed at. I don't know if you
Mm.
get that
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
and I don't know
Yeah.
whether it could be like a nervous energy, or maybe the person might be like maybe had a little too many of the three alcoholic beverages that the distributor has bought beforehand. But there's nothing worse than someone that breaks that kind of energy with a misinformed kind of emotional cue,
Yeah.
which I think sometimes people do intentionally. But these days of content creators, I've seen people film themselves or take a photo of
Ugh.
themselves while watching a movie or something, and it just irritates the shit out of me. But
That's
yeah,
like when I see people do like trailer reactions on YouTube. I think they're the most ridiculous things. I just think they're so silly. Hopefully
yeah,
you don't do
I used to do it, but then after a while, I'm just like, why the fuck am I doing this? Sometimes you just kind of follow trends, and then I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I like watching trailers, but I can't. It's like I'd rather write about, spend that time writing about something than doing that kind of.
Yeah, well, but in that again, that is the dilemma that we face at this point. Anybody that's writing, if you're doing any kind of film journalism, if you're doing any kind of, creator content that relates to it, video is where it's going.
Yeah, yeah.
People aren't really reading as much anymore, which is tragic. It's sad. I love writing. I'm going to continue. I'll always write, but the truth is like audiences aren't really reading, they're watching. And that makes it hard for us, if you didn't grow up in that era where, we would sit down and be like, I'm going to write something amazing and really flesh this out. And now this is what they want. They want talking heads. They want people, that's where their attention span goes. And that's not to say that some people don't still read. I think a lot of people do, but we also have to deal with the fact that, video is the main communication tool now. It's not sitting down and reading. It's not reading long articles because people are so used at this point and they've adapted to getting an influx of information, right? Very quickly. And then very quickly going to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And they're just trying to keep that flow up. And I think it is a byproduct of doom scrolling, and I say doom scrolling as kind of it's encapsulating the whole uh you know it's not necessarily a negative thing, but it kind of is. But
Mm.
doom scrolling in essence, I was thinking about this the other day because my wife was on her phone just sitting there and I was like, we could be watching mindless TV. Instead, she's just, mindlessly scrolling. And I do the same thing sometimes. And that's the new TV, That's the new television is doom scrolling. And it's not really that much different if you think about it. You're flipping through channels, you watch a few minutes of something, you flip to the next channel, flip to the next channel, flip to the next channel. Doom scrolling is the new channel flipping. So
Mm.
it's kind of like we have to figure out a way to kind of coexist with the writers that we've been, and then transitioning that into, well, how do I turn my writing into a video?
Yeah.
And we could fight it. We could fight it all we want. We're going to lose. Technology is constantly evolving, and you either evolve or die with it. So I get that, and I guess that's what I'm saying. Like we all start off in one place in terms of like, oh, I'm gonna do trailer reactions, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna do that. You're gonna follow the trends until you finally figure out, okay, well, this is me, and this is not me, and that's where you lean into it. So it's always evolving, man. It's not easy.
It isn't easy, and I know sometimes I know with myself, like I definitely gone more the video road,
Yeah.
YouTube and Rumble and such. But writing to me will always be my first love, and I still do it. I still write my reviews and write other things. Sometimes I do freelance gigs as well and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I'm glad
I
you do. I
understand. Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
keep it up. Like I think it's important. Like, the surest way to let something die is to quit doing it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
um, if you want to keep writing alive, you just got to keep writing. I'll never stop writing. I think that I'll tell you what I like about writing more so than video. So I think a lot of people, they like seeing reviews, they like seeing, people talking heads talk about a movie, but a lot of it is off the cuff, right?
Mm,
Like, are you writing a script to be, people typically like the conversational style videos, but if you're writing a script for that conversational video, are you really is it going to feel genuine? Now, if you sit down to write a review, you do your first draft, then you go back and you think, this isn't working. It's a refined piece of work that you're getting when you read a review, as long as the writer is good and they do their homework and they do their due diligence. It's a piece of work that's been refined, that's been, fact checked, that's gone through multiple drafts to give you a really clear piece of work about, commentary about a film, but be it a review or a study or whatever. Whereas when you turn on the camera and you're like, okay, I got a few notes here and I got to keep it conversational, that's a totally different kind of information exchange. It's not the same as reading a review. So we have to keep that alive.
Absolutely.
We have to.
Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. I want to move on to a game that I like to play with my guests. It's called Choose Between Two. So I'm going to give you two options, pretty much
Ooh,
based around the same theme, and you're going to choose between the two that you favor the best, and then you can elaborate on that if you want. You ready to play?
okay. Ready.
First one, Braveheart or Gladiator?
Braveheart. No
Oh, that was
question.
quick. Great film. Such a great film. I'm reminded of how great that movie is because I watched Gladiator 2 a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, maybe last week. And fine film, but it kind of reminds me that it's really hard to pull off those kind of movies, those kind of sword and sandal kind of
So
things. And
hard.
Braveheart, to me, still stands as one of the best of them ever.
It's such a tremendous piece of work. And I remember, I saw Braveheart multiple times in the theater. Um, and I was blown away. And I feel cheated, truly. I feel cheated that, Mel Gibson, I feel like Mel Gibson got the shaft. And I think about all the films that and he's already made a tremendous body of films, but I feel that we were cheated out of, more work like that. Over, he's one of the first guys that was ever canceled, right, in
Mm,
Hollywood, which is total. When you compare it to a lot of the cancellations you've seen then, I'm not saying Mel Gibson is a flawless person, but none of us are, right? And I look at the context of a lot of the stuff that he was canceled over. The man's going through a divorce. Going through an addiction problem, and we're like, throw him under the bus.
yeah,
Like to me, I just think that's insane. And he's continually proven to be this amazing filmmaker. You look at Apocalypto, you look at Passion of the Christ. Like this is a guy that has a visual language. Like he understands film. He's not like an actor that they just gave a camera to, right? And like, oh, let's see what he can do. Like this is an Academy Award winning filmmaker. And Braveheart was the one that really put him on the map.
yeah.
And I just feel, man, there's just so many more films. You've heard his name attached to all these different films before, and a lot of them didn't happen. You're just like, man, we really lost out. We really lost out. But Braveheart stands the test of time. I watch it at least once a year, and every time I do, I'm just blown away. I absolutely, I just love it. I love it top to bottom. I think it's just an amazing film. I know it's not, perfectly historically accurate as Gibson has, related, um, but it's still amazing. It's just a great film in every way.
Next one, Kurt Russell or Bruce Willis?
Oh man. I feel like context has to matter there. Like, am I choosing between like just having Bruce Willis films, just having Kurt Russell films, or just in general who I like better?
Well, the ones, let's put it this way, a mixture of both. It's about not only the quality of their films, but also just them as a film personality as well. And the reason why I put them together is they come across to me more than any other star, especially from the 80s, with like really kind of like macho kind of like action films. Those were the two regular guy
Yeah,
action stars,
that's true.
Kurt
Very much the
and
blue collar kind of
yeah.
guys. So I grew up being, and people always knew me as like, oh, you're like the biggest Bruce Willis fan. Bruce Willis, Bruce Willis, Bruce Willis. But I'm gonna give the edge to Kurt Russell. I think that Kurt Russell, he just has a more diverse amount of films from, comedies, action, drama. And I think I don't know, there's just something about Kurt that is unforgettable. I recently just watched Escape from New York and I was like, man, how old was he when he made this? And he was at 30.
Hmm.
And, you think about like him in Tombstone, right? As Wyatt Earp, like what a badass Wyatt Earp. Um, and he's just proven to be like this interesting, diverse actor. And I like that too. Um, I think that as an individual, just a human being, an American, I like that he's a little more outspoken. He doesn't follow the traditional Hollywood lines. He's not afraid to speak his mind. Um, and I did get to interview him once, and it was great. He was super cool. He really struck me as just a great guy. And, I always heard, I never interviewed Bruce Willis prior to his, retirement, but I always heard he was such an asshole.
Mm,
And we had sent people there when I was at Joblo. We had sent people, to be on set visits, I think for Red 2 and some other stuff, and I just heard nothing but bad things about him personally in that sense. And I don't think he was always that way. Um, but I feel like Kurt Russell is just more of like kind of an American treasure in terms of like a movie star, right? Like a classic. He grew up as a Disney kid, and he really rose through the ranks. Um, and I'm trying to think of like a really bad Kurt Russell movie. I know they exist, but he's just a great all-around personality. And I love seeing Kurt Russell in a movie. And there's plenty of Bruce Willis movies where I'm like, it's not very good. But I still
mm,
love Bruce Willis. But
yeah.
we're just giving Kurt Russell the edge.
Next one, CGI or practical effects?
Practical. Practical as much as possible. I'm not averse to CGI, but man, seeing practical effects. I was just thinking about this morning. I was watching. It's funny. So a lot of times I'll start a movie late at night before I go to bed, and I kind of watch it over the course of like 4 nights.
Mm,
As I fall asleep, and it's kind of like my bedtime story, right? I was watching Planes, Trains, and Automobiles,
hmm
John Hughes's film, and I'm watching it, and Hughes actually he's got a number of great shots. Like he's got some golden hour shots that are really beautiful. And I'm looking at all the stuff he's doing. And I'm like, there's no CGI in this. Like, there's a great shot of Chicago where they're driving in, and I'm like, is that CGI? It's like, there's no way. This is like mid 80s. This is not a CGI kind of film. I doubt they had any kind of budget for that. And it looks amazing. It looks real. It feels real. That doesn't mean CGI can't work. It can't complement a film, but man, practical effects, it's just so hard to beat them. Even when they look fake, they look great. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Sometimes not
yeah.
so much. Another example, I was just writing about this on Twitter. I just watched Brotherhood of the Wolf again. It's been a while. I still think it's a great film, but man, the CGI of the creature is awful.
Yeah.
It has not aged well. And there's a few scenes where they had Jim Henson's company did the actual practical stuff. And when they show a few of the practical shots, you're like, oh wow, that's cool, more of that, more of that. And then they cut right to a CGI thing of the monster, and you're just like, it takes you totally out of the movie. And I think that is where practical effects really come into play is consistency and vision, because CGI can completely take you out of it. Now we've advanced so far now that a lot of times you can't tell, and those are the best moments. But when you can, it can ruin the film. So
Mm.
practical all the way.
Physical media or streaming?
I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I am a proponent for physical media. I think physical media is important. There was a time that I was like, I'm sick of buying discs.
hmm
Where am I going to store these? And I used to like spend so much time trying to I would be like on the internet for hours trying to find shelving
mm,
for my discs. Now I don't really worry about that. I'm just more picky and choosy of what I'll buy on physical media because I used to buy everything.
Right.
Like in the early days when DVDs really started coming out, it was like I gotta get them all. I gotta get them all. And I was buying movies that I didn't really care about. Just kind of like I saw it in the theater. I guess I'll buy it. But now I just treat it as if this is a movie that I truly love, and that if Snake Plissken hits the reset button on the whole planet Earth, and we got to start from scratch, and we got to use old, you know, 4K players or DVD players, what would I want to be able to watch?
Mm,
That's my standard for do I buy or do I just maybe I'll get on streaming, and if it disappears, I don't give a shit. Um, so that's my basis. Now, I use streaming like crazy. Obviously, I think we all do. But I think that having a uh, kind of a backup, if you will, and that's a lot of times how I look at it too, is having a backup of physical media, I think is necessary. And I've seen movies disappear. I bought True Romance, the director's cut, on streaming. It won't show up in my library now. It's gone.
Mm, mm.
That's bullshit. Like that sucks. So now I have to track down. And now, of course, I want a 4K version, director's cut, commentaries, all that stuff. And I have it on Blu-ray, but now I need it on 4K, right? So it's like
Right.
that's where it becomes, expensive and tedious. Is like, they up the format. They're like, oh, I gotta buy this. How many times have I bought Point Break at this juncture? So I think that's where again, it's a double-edged sword, but I think that physical media is important.
Last one. You're at the cinema. What's your go-to snack? Popcorn or candy?
Popcorn, extra butter.
Extra butter. Very good.
Extra butter. I want it swimming in butter. Like I want my fingertips to be greasy with butter. It's probably not the healthiest thing, but I go to the movies at this point, usually about, I mean, on average, it would be once a week, but at this point, it's been kind of a dried up marketplace of late. I missed my Red One screening the other day, which I'm not really sad about.
Yeah, you
Um,
didn't miss much.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't think I would, but um, so it's been, oh, it's probably been like, it's almost been 3 weeks since I've been to the movies. Uh, but I'll be back. I'm going to see Gladiator 2 on Tuesday or
Okay.
Monday. Monday, I see Gladiator 2 um, for a screening. And I look forward to my popcorn. It's
You know
I
what?
love it. To me, it's the kind of just when you think about going to the theaters, you think about the movies, it's so arbitrary, right? Like popcorn. Why popcorn? It's just such an arbitrary kind of snack. I guess it's cheap, it's easy to make, it's hot, it's warm. I get it. But it's still kind of arbitrary in terms
Mm,
of like being this theatrical snack. But I guess it kind of goes all the way back to the circus, right? You think of the circus, you think of popcorn.
yeah.
So you think of this big tent entertainment thing. Popcorn is just like the go-to snack. So I guess I get mixed up in the nostalgia aspect of it too. But I do love popcorn. It's not like I'm eating it just because it's nostalgia. I'm eating it because I like it a lot. I love it. I just feel like it's part and parcel with going to the theater.
Yeah. I know when I take my kids to the theater, they love when they get like free popcorn. To them, it's
Oh
just
yeah.
like manna from heaven. It really is. It's like popcorn. And to me, I'm a little jaded about it because I always get free popcorn. And right now, I'm just like, popcorn, yeah, whatever. It's like being in one limo, being in the mall kind of deal. But when they go, they're like, oh, popcorn, I want to have it. So I don't know why I've more transitioned to candies lately or chocolates and such
Oh,
when I
okay.
watch it.
What is your
But I
go-to?
well,
What's your go-to candy?
I like eating kind of like chocolatey kind of stuff, like Maltesers or such. But I made the really big mistake of actually buying a chocolate pack of chocolate from the cinema itself. Because
Oh yeah.
I didn't intend to eat it, but I was with the kids, I was with my family, and I was like, I just feel like a snack, and I couldn't go. We were in like a movie theater, but I was within a shopping center, and I couldn't go all the way to like the grocery store, which was a few flights down. I didn't have enough time. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna buy a pack of chocolates here, like Maltesers or what have you. I don't know. Do you have Maltesers in the States at all?
I think they're called Whoppers here.
So I got a pack, and it cost me, and this is Australian currency, $10.40 Australian.
Mm,
So just
yeah.
put it in context. If I bought that at the grocery store, it will cost me like $7 Australian. So it's like a markup of like 300 something dollars. And
Yeah.
I'm an
It's the same
independent.
here.
Yeah, it's like
It's the
I'm
same
just
here.
like,
Concessions
yeah,
are ridiculously expensive and the
ridiculous.
portion
Yeah,
sizes are usually smaller, so
yeah,
yeah. It's kind of nonsense. And that's why a lot of times so we'll go to I don't know if you guys have Target in
yeah.
Australia,
We
but
did. All the stores are closed down, so it's only online now. But we used to have it
oh
over there.
no.
Mm.
Well, there's a Target right next to our theater. So a lot of times, like if we want to get something other than popcorn, like I'll ask my son or whoever, I'm like, well, let's go to Target and get it and bring it in because you're going to get better portions and better prices.
Yeah,
Plain and
absolutely.
simple. Um, but also, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this too. Our theaters here are becoming like almost like restaurants when you go in.
Oh
You can
yeah,
get a pizza, you can get one of those giant cookie pie thingies.
right.
Like there's like so many things. You can get donuts, you can get all this crazy stuff. You get a cheeseburger and fries like at the movies, which I would never get. I would never there's no point that I would go to the theater and be like, let me get a cheeseburger and fries from the movie theater. I can only imagine what that would taste like and where it's coming from.
Yeah,
But yet there it is, and people do order it, and it's crazy to me. But it's, again, like theaters, that's where they make the brunt of their money from. They don't make it the brunt of it from ticket sales. They make it from concessions. So
yeah,
I get it. And part of me is like, well, I'll pay for concessions to support, the theater because I do want the theater to stay here. I don't want to be like, screw you guys, just play the movies. Like they got to make money too. And I understand that. So, popcorn and a soda, you got me. Anything else? You gotta pump the brakes on that.
yeah. I want to transition to talk about your time in the US Army, if you don't mind, if I just touch on
Sure.
that. It was something really interesting. So 9/11 was a big impetus in regards to your decision to join that. And I've read like stories about other people as well about how that moment in time was such an incredibly transitional moment. I think for me, there's pre and post. There's no denying it. Like especially in our lifetime, and
Yeah.
I've read of different actors like Rob Riggle. I think Adam Driver as well was another one who was really motivated with 9/11 to join. I think Adam Driver was in the Marines. I'm not sure about Rob
Yeah,
Riggle
he
though.
was a Marine. Yep.
And I know when I read an interview with you or heard an interview of you, you said at that time, I think you were 25, and you said you want to be part of something that was beyond yourself.
Yeah.
Um, do you feel that you have, when you went through that and now looking back at it now, that do you feel like you achieved that goal, that you went through something and you're part of something that was beyond yourself? Did you achieve that and then some?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up again watching G.I. Joe cartoons and playing with G.I. Joes and playing guns with my friends and, watching action movies and all this other stuff. But I think there was a part of me always before 9/11 that was kind of like I didn't grow up thinking, well, when I'm X years old, I'm going to join the military. I had no plans to join the military. My plan, with some of my friends, my who all work in Hollywood now, we were all gonna move to Hollywood together and fish for jobs and make it
Mm,
happen. And 9/11 happened, and it affected my worldview and it affected my view of my place in the world. Um, and I could remember as far back when the first Gulf War started. I remember seeing the news was on TV and they were showing the planes taking off and the war was starting. And I think I was like 12, 13, something like that. And there was this feeling that I could not get beyond, which was I felt like I wanted to be a part of it when that was happening. And I can't explain why. I really can't. But I remember seeing the planes taking off and it's like you see the world happening and they're like, well, but you can just watch. But I was like, I don't want to just watch. I want to be a part of this, right? And so when 9/11 happened, there was such a flurry of emotions. One was for me immediately like anger and fear. As an American, you're watching your country be attacked, which is, let's look at it realistically. From America is a very safe place in that sense. We're not like Palestine. We're not like many of the places across the world that are, we're not like Africa. We're not like, where there's, multiple countries in Africa. There's always war, civil war. We're not Burma. We're not these places where bombs are dropping on our head on a regular basis, and that's just how we live. And so I felt somewhat privileged and I felt ignorant when that happened. And so there was a part of me is like, first I wanted revenge. I want to be a part of the people that are killing the people that are trying to kill us. Um, and then it was a huge part of me that was like, I don't understand why this happened. And I felt
mm,
really stupid. I felt like just like this stupid person. Like this obviously happened. Thousands of our people were just killed, and I don't know why. Meanwhile, there's plenty of people that know why, and we've Monday morning quarterback 9/11 to death, and we have a pretty damn good idea of why that happened. Although you have your conspiracy theorists that it was an inside job. I don't I don't prescribe to that. But I felt like I needed to know. more about the world, and beyond that, I needed to know if I could do it.
Mm,
And I think that a lot of people go through that where we love Martin Riggs, we love John McClane, we love all these, heroic people that go off and do these things. And the truth is, I didn't have the confidence in myself that I was like, well, I could totally do it. I was more like, I need to find out.
yeah.
Yeah. And I went to the recruiters. I went to join. They actually tried to talk me out of it. They were like, why do you want to? Because I was like, I want the commercial, man. I want, I want the cool guy stuff. I want the guns. I want everything. I want all of that. And they were like, why? They really do qualify you, at least at that branch of the recruiters. They're like, they wanted to make sure that I was 100% in doing that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a transformative experience to say the least. It's Full Metal Jacket, it's Black Hawk Down, it's all that shit. And then it's also a lot of boredom.
Mm,
It's a lot of tedious stuff. It's a lot of stupidity, and it's everything, and it's all at once. So at the end of the day, what I found out is that, I'm not a hero. All the heroes are dead. I'm a survivor. War is hell. War is awful. War also keeps you pretty busy. And, when you come back to the States after war, um, you find that a switch has been turned on that can't be turned off, and that you got to carry that with you for the rest of your life. So to say that it was an informative, transformative, wild, crazy, sad, uh, challenging experience, I think that about sums it up. And I carry
it's
with me to this day. It's something that will always be a part of me. It's part of the a huge part of the graphic novel that I'm working on right now. Is a commentary as well as a fun, cool fictional story. But yeah, it's an experience you can't just turn it off. You can't be like, oh yeah, that was fun. That wasn't summer camp. It is embedded in my DNA at this point.
Did it affect in any way how you watched movies afterwards? Like when you watch a war film, for example, just say you're working at Joe Blow, you had to go watch, I don't know, Lone Survivor or something like that. Does it
Yeah,
affect the way that you looked at those movies? Do you look at it in a
absolutely.
different light?
Absolutely. So like as a kid, or just as just a normal fan that has not served in the military, let alone gone to combat, uh, I loved those movies, right? Like I thought Full Metal Jacket was cool. I thought like, and even right before I joined was when Black Hawk Down came out. I went
Mm,
to basic training, I think like 5 or 6 months after Black Hawk Down. And I remember I kept going back to see Black Hawk Down, and I would get all pumped up and I'd be like, that's what I want. That's what I want to be a part of. That's what I want to do this. And, your perspective on that changes drastically. Um, Once you've been there and done that, especially, being in combat, you look at it and you just see it so differently because you know what these guys are going through in those actual situations. Whereas before I was like, oh, that's really cool. That would be fun, or that would be badass, or, whatever. You can, you could step away from that. But now you can't. You can't watch a war movie without being like, what? Wait a minute, or just feeling overwhelmed. And Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, Lone Survivor. These are movies, at this point when I watch them, I get emotionally disrupted. That's the best
mm,
way to put it. Whereas before I would just be like, that was cool. I want to be like those guys. And it's like, well, I've been those guys. And it's a lot different than just feeling cool. It's a very different experience, especially when you go through the loss of your comrades, violently. That is going to change and shape your perception anytime you watch those movies. It's no longer like, oh, that was badass. See that guy get killed? It's like you feel it differently. And I think it's a good thing, truly. And I've gotten a lot better to watch these films. There was a time where it's like, I can't watch this. I can't watch this. I can't watch this. And there is one documentary that I saw called Restrepo, which I can't
mm,
watch again. I won't watch it again, because it is a gut punch. It's because it's real. It is, one of the most, if you really want to get kind of an immersive feel for the reality of it. Particularly the confusion, the insanity, and then the tragedy of loss. You know, losing somebody in an instant, not everybody experiences that, right? Like maybe you lose a friend or a family member, but losing somebody like immediately in your vicinity violently is a whole different experience. And Restrepo is very much one of those movies that highlights that. And it's a tough watch. I can't watch it again.
When you've done your tours of Iraq and Afghanistan, you come home, the first kind of major thing you do, real like professionally wise, was work for Joe Blow. I think you started off as a staff writer and then you became a editor-in-chief, and all up you were there for like 8 9 years.
Yep.
How did that kind of come about for you that you landed in with Joe Blow at that time?
So, Joe Blow was always my favorite movie news site. I loved Ain't It Cool, Dark Horizons, coming soon. But Joe Blow was always like when I would go check my movie news every day, which I don't do it like that anymore at all. But Joe Blow was always what I saved for last because I always considered them the best. And the reason that I like Joe Blow was because Joe Blow would allow the writers to have an opinion. So you would give the facts, but then you would give your take, right?
Mm,
And that was part of the community at that time, you know, was very much like we're not just aggregators, we're also, you know, we're here to give perspective and to give a take, you know, to kind of set up the readers to respond, right? Or to gain something out of what this, you know, here's a rather than just giving you the facts, which is like Coming Soon was a good site where you would just get the facts, no opinion, no, you know, no dialogue about the news, just like here are the facts, boom, goodbye. Joe
yeah.
Blow was different. So I respected that and I really liked that about Joe Blow. Um, and funny enough, I had actually tried out to be a DVD reviewer for Joe Blow. I did the whole tryout process and I didn't make the cut.
Mm,
And I had talked to Joe Blow himself, Burge, who's he's a Canadian guy that runs and created Joe Blow from his parents' basement. Um, and I didn't get the job, but I was like, well, that was fun. We'll see what happens. And then I had a government job for, you know, a good while. And then there came a tryout period for a staff writer because Joe Blow would always post, we're looking for writers.
yeah.
It's like, what do I got to lose? You know, I'll try again. And I tried out, and dude, I worked my ass off to get that. Like, it's a whole week tryout. You've got to write 3 news stories a day for 5 days. You write them, you turn them in, you get no feedback. You just have to do it. And what I found out later when I became editor in chief, when we did more of those, is that you would be shocked at how many people are given that opportunity and how many just fumble it. How
Mm,
many people like they'll do one day and then they just stop turning in stuff or they quit right away or there's so many people that like talk a big game about how, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, and they just absolutely fail outright. They don't put forth their best effort. I've seen it multiple times. Every time, in fact. So, anyways, I gave it my all. And I remember what's interesting is my father died shortly after I had done the tryout. I went to my father's funeral and, you know, it was like really just like kind of this horrific, uh, life altering thing. And I remember I came back home. This is when I lived in Alaska. I came back home and I had totally forgotten about the tryout. I hadn't really given it much thought. And then I just got an email, hey, you made it. You're in. And I was like, yes. Like it was such a victory. I was so happy. And so Burge, Joe Blow, he is very like he was very open to ideas and he was like, hey, you know, he would send out, you know, emails that connected with the whole staff. He'd be like, you guys got ideas? Shoot them to me. Let's talk about, you know, doing columns or doing, you know, whatever, you know, whatever ideas you might have to help make the site better. And dude, I unloaded all these ideas on him, and he was like, "Whoa, whoa, okay, this is great. You know, it's a lot of stuff." And then the person that was training me was Mike Sampson, who was the editor chief in the time. And I remember I had asked him a question that my first week, and I don't remember what it was, but he's like, you know that like this is my last week, right?
Mm.
I was like, no, I had no idea. This is, yeah, he's like, I'm leaving. And I knew immediately, as soon as he said that, that the editor in chief job was going to be up for grabs. And the very first thought I had when I found that out was like, I want that job. I
Yeah.
want that job like that. And I knew as a, as a journalist, as a film guy, that the EIC job is that's the top shit. Like that's it, man. That's what you want. That is the creme de la creme for a movie news site is to be EIC. And I chased it. I did everything I could. I worked my ass off. I did graphics for the site because I'm I have a degree in graphic design and art and all that other stuff. And I started doing all the graphics for the site. No extra pay. I was just like, I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll do this. I just wanted
Yeah.
to prove myself. And within a year at Comic-Con, um, it was the first Comic-Con I'd ever been to, and Burge was going there, and he said, "Hey, um, let's meet for lunch while you're here."
Hmm.
And I knew that that's what it was going to be about, and it exactly was. And he was like, "Yeah, because looking for a new editor in chief." We talked about it the whole time, and he offered me the job about a week after Comic Con, and I was like, yeah, let's do. Like, I was like, it was a dream job. I was like, absolutely, I'm in. So that's pretty much the journey in terms of getting from, the military all the way up until being EIC of Joe Blow.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. Let's move on to another game I like to play called Rapid Fire Questions. I'm going to throw some questions to you. Try
Oh
to give
boy,
me the first answer that comes to your head, and then we can elaborate on it afterwards. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
Best John Carpenter movie.
Christine,
Wow. Okay, that's a really out of the blocks, out of the box kind of answer because I was like anticipating Thing, Escape from New York, that kind of thing. But Christine,
I
okay, go
just
ahead.
I just rediscovered Christine. It's on Hulu streaming here, and oh my God, it looks so freaking good. I mean, watching it, the script, the music, the performances, everything, it's like a modern day A24 movie.
Hmm.
I challenge everybody, go back and watch Christine in the highest quality version you can find. It is awesome. I absolutely love it. It is by far my favorite John Carpenter film at this point. That may change at some other time, but I just went through a whole John Carpenter filmography rewatch. I haven't hit everything, but I did Halloween. I did Escape from New York. They Live. What else did I do? Vampires. Uh, Christine is amazing. It is
Mm,
so overlooked. And we were talking about practical effects earlier.
yeah.
The way that Carpenter did the effects, practical effects for this car putting itself back together, which was that they destroyed the car and they used these like I can't think of the name, but whatever, they used like these tools to pull the car in to crash it up. And then what they did is they played it back in reverse so that the car was putting itself back together, but it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like, oh, they just reversed it. When you're watching, you're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. All practical and just smart
Mhm.
filmmaking. And the cinematography in that is so good. Like it just looks so sharp and I just love it. So yeah, Christine for me.
I love that film. One of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, hands down. Um, so I know you're a big comic book guy. Is there a comic book that hasn't been adapted yet to the big screen that you'd like to see adapted to the big screen?
Yes, and I'm surprised. The only way it can be adapted is as a series. But Brian K. Vaughan's Saga
Hmm.
is the comic waiting in the wings that will be like the next Game of Thrones, the next whatever. It will be huge but it's gonna take a place like HBO, maybe Showtime, maybe one of those, but it's gonna take a budget, and it's gonna take the right creative team. But Saga is just waiting in the wings for a multi-series adaptation that would just be so great. It's just an awesome, awesome story. And anybody that's read Saga will know, and I think agree, it is ripe. And I am shocked, truly shocked that nobody has picked up Saga yet. And if I happen to, find myself within the realms of Hollywood production anytime soon, Saga is a property I would totally chase for a streaming service. It would be amazing.
Um, I know you love Die Hard, so I guess on my note, an answer to this question is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
No, it's an action movie.
Okay, I'm going to ask again because I'm not sure if I heard you right. Because you're the one of maybe two, and that includes me, that has said this. So once again, is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
No, Die Hard is an action movie that takes place during Christmas.
Thank you. You know
I
how
don't
much of an
understand
island
this
I've been
this
on my
whole.
own island here. I've been, looking for food. I got Wilson next to me.
We're both stranded on this island now, but hey, we're gonna help
Yeah,
each other.
welcome. Welcome. Come. I got some, pine cones. I got some fire going on. Yes.
I
Yes.
get so annoyed with that argument, to be honest. Like people trying to, and even McTiernan said, yes, it's a Christmas movie. And I'm like, I understand you're the
Afterwards.
director,
Long
but you're wrong.
afterwards. Yeah.
Um, there's just what correlation does it have for Christmas? Like I guess you can draw all your own conclusions and you can easily make it up and be like, well, John McClane is the savior and these are all like the sinners or some crazy crap. I just don't buy that, and the book that it's based on is not a Christmas book.
Yeah.
Um, Nothing Lasts Forever. It's not a Christmas book. Christmas is just a setting, you know? I don't understand. Like, I don't watch Die Hard, a National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, or A Christmas Story in the same vibe. It's not, Die Hard isn't part of my Christmas rotation, although I do like to watch it on Christmas Eve, but not because it's Christmas, but because the movie takes place on Christmas Eve. So I think
Mm.
that's cool. It's just kind of fun to watch it as a Christmas Eve movie, but not because of Christmas, just the fact that it takes place then. It's just a coincidental fun thing that you can do, but it makes no commentary about Christmas. It doesn't bring forth the Christmas vibes. It's like, yeah, there's lights. Yes, there's jingle bells and the score by Michael Kamen. There's it takes place during Christmas, so of course, but it is a finely tuned action film. And that is what it is. It has nothing to do with the holidays in that sense. There is no message there. So the message is about redemption for John McClane, and that's it. Redemption for a lot of characters, also redemption for Al Powell, right? That's ultimately what Die Hard is about. It's about redemption, um, and that's it.
Thank you. You're my new best friend. Um, Last one. Pineapple on pizza. Yes or
No,
no?
no,
Yeah. I like you
please
even more
don't.
now. Yep.
Please don't. Listen, I'm not anybody to take away from somebody's enjoyment of how they want it, but if you give me pineapple on pizza, I'm gonna pick it off and I'm not gonna be happy about it. That's just me. But I respect anybody that if that's what you want to do, if you want to mess up your pizza, you go right ahead.
Hmm.
Me personally, when it comes to pizza, I'm kind of simple in a way. I get double pepperoni, double cheese, and extra sauce if I have to, because most of the time they don't put enough sauce on the pizza depending on where you're getting it from. So I like to make sure I have enough of all the ingredients I want. There's nothing more annoying to me than getting a pizza that looks like a piece of cardboard where they just sprinkled a little bit of cheese and put two pepperonis on there. So it's
Mm.
not so much that I get extra cheese and pepperoni because I have to have extra. It's honestly so that I know that I'll have enough. Because a lot of times they're like they give you barely any. So that's why I order it that way. And that's how I'll always order it.
Your last two answers has put you in my Mount Rushmore, my favorite interviews in this series. Absolutely. I
Hey,
want to
I'm
talk
glad
about.
if we can find that kind of way forward, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And you know what?
No,
There's going to be people that'll listen to this and they'll be like, "Yeah, me too."
yeah.
So, There you
Like you
go.
have no idea. I think this is like my just trying to think my 21st or 22nd Saturday conversation that I've done. And the ratio for Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I think if you include me as well, I think it's like 18 to 3, 18
Wow.
yeses. And so a lot of people have really, gone down that road. And I'm trying to understand when it kind of started, this whole thing. I have no idea. Do you know when it started, the whole Christmas Die Hard kind of thing? I don't know. Was it a
I
marketing
don't know
thing
where
or
it
something? Or
began, but it seems to pop up every time around Christmas. And I think a lot of times it's just because slow news days and they need something to talk about.
yeah, very true.
And that's why it comes up. But I just think it's a silly argument to begin with. And at the end of the day, people can say if they decide that it's a Christmas movie for themselves, that's fine. I vehemently disagree. Um, it just doesn't make any sense to me, that it's a Christmas movie. It's like
Hmm.
saying, well, Speed is a bus movie. Like, no, Speed is not a bus
It's
movie. It's an
Speed's
action
a
movie
movie
that takes
about
place on a
the
bus.
perils of public transport.
So, I mean, we could argue that stuff all day long, and I think it could be good discourse. But at the end of the day, you're not going to convince me that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, ever.
No, me either. This last section here, I just want to talk about. So, I read that when it came to Joe Blow, you were there for a while, but it became kind of formulaic for you. The create, you wouldn't be able to kind of be kind of creative in it. It was a managerial position more than anything else. You're doing your own thing now. So we have Arctic Ninja Network over at YouTube, got Way of the Shirey over at Substack. The thing that I'm really interested in though is Born 77 Comics
Hmm.
and your graphic novel you're working on, The War slash Scars. And you
Yes.
mentioned it briefly before. It's kind of like a commentary on what you went through, but at the same time, it's kind of like an action series kind of stuff. I've
Yeah.
seen some of the posts you put up on like your socials in regards to like different comic panels and stuff. Looks awesome, by the way.
Thank
I
you.
really,
Thank you.
I really have a deep respect and admiration for people like yourself that can illustrate in the way that you do, because I know that it was always kind of like aspiration of mine when I was a kid to do that. I can't do it anymore. Thankfully, my youngest son, Gabriel, he's 9. He draws so well for his age because he loves comic books and Sonic
Oh,
and all
that's
this kind
great.
of stuff. He's doing freehand drawings now as I'm looking at stuff, and I'm really encouraging him to just keep going forward with that stuff. I think it's awesome that he has
What
that.
comics does he like? What comics is he into?
He likes more kind of like any kind of graphic novel stories. He doesn't subscribe to any Marvel or DC. He loves but like Sonic Hedgehog comics, kind
Okay,
of
yeah,
like
yeah. My son was into
uh
Sonic for a long time.
loves that stuff. Super Mario. He doesn't play the games. We don't have consoles, but he loves the lore of it. He loves the mythology, so he
Yeah.
likes looking at that stuff, and also stuff like Dave Pikey stuff, like Captain Underpants and
Okay, yeah.
that Kid Comic Club, like all that kind of stuff. But he also digs going through. My older son does as well. They go through my old comics that I have from the 80s and 90s and looking at that
Oh
stuff
yeah.
as well. I still kept all of them from when I was a kid. So they love going through that as well. When it comes to the war scars though, was it always aspiration for you since after you came back from your time over in Iraq and Afghanistan to kind of put this stuff on paper and make a graphic novel, or was this something that kind of comes about later in your life as you are further away from that time in the U.S. Army?
It came about a little bit later. My initial aspiration was I wanted to work for Marvel or DC. I wanted to work for one of the big two, and I actually did a Punisher Bucky cap, that is the Winter Soldier as Captain America, sample pages. And I was working really, really hard on those, and I finished them, and I was like, these are great, but it took me it took me much longer than I anticipated to get those done, and I was like, well, I don't know that I can if I can keep up with that pace of a monthly book. So, but I thought about it as I was working on that, and I thought about really what it came down to is like, what kind of story, as a comic book fan, as somebody that is a reader, me, that goes to the shop almost weekly, what stories do I want to read? What stories are not out there? And the stories that I like, again, like I had said earlier, like stories grounded in reality, characters like the Punisher, the Crow, things like that. Well, the Crow's not exactly grounded in reality, but it's also not spaceships and lasers and superpowers outside of the supernatural. Those are the stories that really appealed to me, and those needs weren't really being met in the comic shop, and they aren't really now. Um, Marvel has done everything they can to distance themselves from the Punisher and Frank Castle at this point, which
Mm,
is a travesty.
yeah.
Um, and a terrible byproduct of kind of this woke ideology that you can't have a character like that anymore. So for me, it was a question of, well, what is that story that I wanted to read? What is it that I wanted to, what am I interested in? And I think that anybody that's going to create a comic, make a movie, or any kind of piece of art, you don't make it for other people. You don't. You make the stories that you want to see. Because if you're making it for somebody else, it's not going to be genuine because you're going to be constantly catering to somebody else, not catering to your muse, not catering to that drive within you that says, this is what I want. This is what I want to see. This is what I want to make. And so that's what led me to the War Scars, which originally was called Right Wing. And I wanted it to be kind of incendiary in a way.
Mm,
But ultimately, the War Scars fits it better. And that's why the slash is in the titles, because it's the war, the scars. It's meant to highlight two different aspects of this comic. And ultimately, I pulled from myself. I pulled from people that I served with. I pulled from all these different directions of characters to that I wanted to embody real people. They're characters, but they are 100% pulled from living humans that I know. And I wanted that authenticity with these characters. And I also knew that I wanted to make basically what would equate to kind of an action movie or action series. And the best way that I can equate it is something like Sons of Anarchy meets the A Team in a military setting.
mm,
That's kind of like the short pitch version. And there's elements of Rambo in there. If you watch First Blood, when you see uh, Rambo coming, back to the States and he's walking along the road and he's carrying his bag, it's almost a metaphor. You're carrying this baggage with you back into the world. And I really wanted to tap into that. Um, and I wanted to explore what that means in a modern day setting because that is one of the biggest things that veterans face, mostly combat veterans, guys that have been at war, actual war, is how do you come back to the real world? Like you were conducting combat operations with millions of dollars of equipment. I won't say given carte blanche to just kill whoever you want to kill, but you're in a situation where that is your job. Your job is to literally murder people effectively. And then you come back, you're like, well, what do you want to do? You want to go work for UPS? Do you want to be a server? Do you want to be a cop? A lot of these guys like myself, they can't be cops because they can't pass the psyche eval because being a soldier versus being a cop are very different things.
mm,
So these are all things I wanted to tackle. And ultimately what I wanted to create is how does somebody, a veteran, find purpose, a combat veteran find purpose? And there's so many things going on in the world that you can pull from terrorism to cults. I really wanted to dive into cults, and that is a primary feeder into this story of how everything is a cult. The army is a cult. The military is a cult. And you're just kind of like picking your poison in many ways. And how do you find out who you really are? How do you find purpose in your life without all of these things? So there's a tremendous threat that the main characters face that they end up getting embroiled into a situation and involved with people that ultimately want to use them and cause some serious damage to not just the United States but the world. And so suddenly these group of veterans who are lacking in purpose suddenly have one, but it's not welcome as it was when they were overseas. So it's a long, twisty journey that's grounded in reality. It's violent. It's destructive, and I think that it will be. I don't think I know. There is no other comic book on the shelf like War Scars. It does not exist. I know this, and I don't say this because like, oh, mine's the best. I'm saying because I know. I buy comics. I'm at the comic shop weekly. I see everything that comes out. There's nothing like the War Scars on the shelves. And I think one of the biggest drawbacks is that we don't have enough veteran artists and writers involved in these things. And if you really think about it, tremendous amount of amazing writers in the comics industry. But how many of them have actually been to combat or served in war? You look back in the old days in World War II, you guys like Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, yeah, they served in World War II, but how many of them served in combat arms? Not many.
Mm.
So I think if anything, anything at all, I will bring a unique perspective to the war scars that you're not going to get with any other comic. And there's a part of me that struggles with it too, just like anybody. You want to make sure that your vision is coming across and that it's going to reach people. But at the end of the day, this is a story I have to tell. Um, and I'm committed to it till, I cease to draw breath. Book one is almost complete. I'm at I think I have 10 pages left. But it is a lengthy process too, writing and drawing. I've rewritten the script a number of times as I progress because this has been a years long process, in the midst of working everything else. But, each page is drawn traditionally, pencil, ink, but then it goes through a whole other level where the art is scanned and I work on it in Procreate and Photoshop. So, you know, this is it's extremely refined. This is not some tossed together like, oh, hey, here's some stuff. Like this book is really going through a tremendous process from start to finish. And I guess my only hope is that people see that when it comes out next year, when book one comes out. And then the work on book two will begin. And we'll see where we go from there. So, but I thank you for asking me about that. And I hope that people will join me uh, and read the book. I think it really will offer something for people that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Well, I know that as soon as it comes out, I'm going to grab a copy of it myself for sure.
I
And
That would be amazing.
it's a wonderful to me. I think, I can't stress how many times that I say this to people all the time. It's such a big need throughout all type of artistic endeavors, whether it be filmmaking, content creation, graphic novel, comic book writing, that the independent scenes in these places, the independent worlds, independent artists, the writers, are supported from a
Yeah.
lot bigger community out there. And you mentioned before how a lot of people kind of like I let my kids read comics, but I don't let them read the comics that I read when I was a kid because I don't know what's in it anymore. You talked before about like the woke ideology and stuff. It's like I don't know what's happening with characters, and I keep reading stories about this character has turned this way, this character is now that way, and that kind of thing. It's like it's same with Disney. Like we gave up our Disney subscription like 2 years ago or something. Like
Oh,
I'm not
really?
watching any of
Wow.
that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not watching that
You
stuff.
spared yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, but there's a scene out there of people, of artists, of writers, of creators that are making their own stuff independently, and they're
Yeah. Oh,
releasing
it's
this stuff.
huge.
It is huge because it's the mainstream kind of legacy kind of publishers and media conglomerates or whatever have dropped the ball so hard over the last say
Yeah.
10 years or so that the people with an authentic voice that doesn't fit in with whatever philosophical, ideological kind of nonsense is going on now, and which hopefully will change. I'm hoping after the this latest election, with the decisive
Yeah.
way that the American
The
people are going to
pendulum is
bring Trump.
swinging back finally.
Yeah, I
It's
think so,
it's
and I hope so.
it's a good
I have
thing.
a feeling it's going to happen in Australia as well very soon too. Hopefully, um, and I'll tell you off air about some stuff that's happened here that's just been freaking nuts. But I'm hoping that it swings back, and I think the people who's going to be the big charge for it are the independents. I think they
Yeah.
are.
Oh,
And I
100%. And you're seeing these direct to consumer books, which is what mine will be. It's a direct to consumer. At least that's the plan. But the truth be told, if Image was like, "Hey, we want to partner with Born 77 and do that," I'd be like, well, that's not terrible. The truth is, I
mm,
want to get my book in as many hands as possible. But at the end of the day, I just want to get it into hands. But yeah, like direct to consumer crowdfunding, Indiegogo books. You look at guys like Ethan Van Sciver who does Cyberfrog. I know he's part of like Comicsgate, and that can be controversial for people, but the bottom line is he's doing amazing. He's in control of his work. He's making a tremendous amount of money doing so, money that he's would not be making drawing for Marvel and DC. And this is what a lot of creators are seeing. Guys like Tyler Kirkham, you're seeing all these guys that have been superstars at Marvel and DC are now like, yeah, I'm just going to go do my own stuff because the pay is not great. I'm creating these characters that become, TV shows and movies, and I get paid pennies for my contribution. And I feel like that is one of the biggest slaps in the face. We see like Marvel films and DC films, like, top tier. These are what everybody loves. They're so amazing. And the people that created these characters that wouldn't exist if they hadn't made them are
Mm.
getting like nothing.
Yeah.
It's the greatest injustice. It's the artistic injustice. And I think that a lot of times we just kind of accept it, right? We're like, well, that's just the way it is. Like, no,
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 not these
because now
days.
you have the means to control it, right? You have the means to, at a minimum, to set your own pace. To, you can crowdfund your own book, um, and you can make it happen that way. The hardest part is just reaching as many people as possible. That's the trick. That's
Yeah.
the challenge. And your book also needs to be good.
Of course.
So, I mean, there's that too. But yeah, I think direct to consumer is going to continue to skyrocket. And I'll tell you, we're seeing this in Hollywood too. Look at like the Terrifier films, right?
Mm.
Damien Leone is making like what, a 500% profit margin or some other craziness like with Terrifier 2 and now Terrifier 3.
Mm.
Bypass Hollywood, bypass the MPAA, now the highest grossing unrated film of all time. This is a guy that's doing, he's doing directing, writing, he's doing the practical effects because he's a practical effects guy, and he's making a killing. And even Hollywood came knocking. They're like, hey, we'll let you make your movie, but yeah, you're gonna have to get a rating and do this and that and do this and that. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna jump through your hoops. I'm gonna do it myself.
Yeah.
And look what's happening. And I think we're going to continue to see a revolution of this. You look at guys like Zachary Levi, um, who, is saying like, people need to come forward with their voices because Hollywood is dying.
Yep.
And I think in many ways that it is. I think it's traditional Hollywood that's dying. Film's never going to die.
No.
Movies are always going to be made. You can't stop, this human desire to create and to make stories and to share those with people and to use visual language in every facet possible. But I think the model is going to change, you know, like you've seen Red One. I haven't seen it yet. I think Red One's going to be a huge flop. I don't think it's going to be a huge moneymaker. Um, and that's just one example of many where it's like you see like all of this stuff being put into these movies. Um, that are going to come out and just not make anything. Whereas you get guys like Damon Leone, who's on a $3 million budget and turns in a ridiculous profit. That's what people are going to be looking for. That's what Hollywood's going to have to start looking for. And a lot of that is going to have to be giving power back to creators rather than, nitpicking them all along the way. I think we'll see that. I don't know if it'll perform. We'll see. But Captain America Brave New World, this is a movie that has been reworked top to bottom. I know this from insiders. This is a movie, the VFX have been completely scrapped and redone. The amount of money put into this, it cannot afford to not make $1 billion.
Mm.
If if Brave New World does not make $1 billion, it's a flop.
Mm.
Um, it's just there's too much that's been put into it, and Marvel's going to have to change their ways, when it comes to that. And it's going to be interesting to see what direction they take. But maybe I'll be wrong, and Brave New World will be a smash hit, and will stay on pace. But I'm not going to hold my breath. I
No.
mean, when it's that troubled, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if you could salvage it, you know? So we'll see. But yeah, I think independent stuff from comic creators and filmmakers is going to be a massive movement that you're going to see grow tremendously in the next few years.
I think to me, at the end of the day, it's a thing of quality over quantity. I think
Yes,
Hollywood
absolutely.
are so enamored in this content war with all of the streaming stuff, especially that they stretch themselves thin to the point where if you look at something like Star Wars, for example, like I know they just released news of a new trilogy coming out, and my thing was like, I'm just not into the Star Wars thing more because there's so much of it now. When I was a kid, it was so sparse, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the same thing can be said about superhero movies. But the interesting thing about superhero movies is that this year was hardly any, right? I can't even think of
Yeah.
two. So maybe
Yeah,
next
Deadpool
year,
and Wolverine kind of just
yeah,
cornered the market. And that's honestly, that's the kind of year you want to have.
yeah,
Have a I'd rather have one Deadpool and Wolverine than three like Captain or the Marvels or, you know,
yeah, Eternals,
yeah, like that's awful. Those are terrible.
yeah,
That's a terrible choice, you know, because it's an easy choice. We'll take the Deadpool and Wolverine over any of that. You know, the problem is, hopefully, I don't know that Marvel will learn the lesson of why Deadpool and Wolverine worked. You have guys like Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman that are passionate, passionate. Sean Levy, passionate as well, and somebody that knows what he's making. But you have these creators that love the characters they're working with. They love everything about it and they put everything into it. So what you're getting is you're getting a refined piece of work that's made with love and passion rather than a movie made by committee, you know, Marvel
mm,
hiring directors that have no business being in the superhero genre and then basically just overlording them. You know, they Richard Marquand them like George Lucas on Return of the Jedi, you know, just standing over their shoulders and like, and then saying things like, well, don't worry about the action. We'll take care of that. Like,
mm.
what? So if you hire an action director, are you going to hire drama people to do the drama? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. You know, they need to hire better filmmakers and better people that are suited to the task rather than this kind of um, like basically DEI style hires where they're like they're not hiring for the talent, they're hiring like, well, look, we hired X kind of person to do this movie rather than
Absolutely.
hiring the best person to do this movie. It's
Yeah.
nonsense. It's total nonsense. And you can still check those boxes by still hiring the right people. And they're just hiring all the wrong people in many instances. So we'll see if those lessons are learned. And like you said with Star Wars, I think Star Wars, we're at this point, we're spoiled, but we're spoiled with mediocrity.
Mm.
And that's a problem. And I think it's hilarious, this news of creatives fighting over who controls Rey, who I find to be the most unengaging Star Wars character. Certainly not the what apparently they think is their best cash cow. Like what? Who is telling them this? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I get that some people love Rey. They think she's great, but I think she is a woefully underwritten character, underdeveloped, and really just she's been built by committee. You know, her whole journey by her own admission. You know, talking to J.J. Abrams as she's getting ready to go into Rise of Skywalker. You know, she's still, you know, JJ's like, oh, we're not sure who's going to be the dad yet. You know, we're not quite sure. And then it's like, oh, now it's going to be Palpatine.
Mm.
It's an inconsistently built character that is not prepared to lead all of Star Wars. And Disney will pay the price for it. I guarantee you. I would be
Well said.
shocked if it goes any other way.
Yeah. As I said before, it's needs to be about quality over quantity. And when it comes to you, Paul, you are not only a quality artist, quality writer, but a quality individual as well. And I really recommend everyone to please check out Paul's stuff. Go to the Arctic Ninja Network over YouTube. Please check out The Way of the Shirey at Substack. Make sure, and if you do so, you actually subscribe with a payment option and not the free option, so you can get all the good stuff. And also be on the lookout for the War/Scars next year, Paul. Is that what we're thinking of?
Yeah, next year. Next year. We got 10 pages to finish and get through. And from there, it's going to be, I'll be fishing other creatives to do incentive covers and things like that. So lots of stuff on the way for that. But yeah, 2025 is the year for the War Scars.
So for everyone listening, when that comes out as well, make sure I'll be sharing all my stuff on my socials as well because we need to back all the independent creatives out there, people. I can't emphasize how important it is that we do that. And Paul, thank you so very much for your time today. Best of luck with the War Scars. And I
Thank
know it's
you.
going to be great because for the panels that you showed so far and this just the story you shared with me, it sounds like I haven't bought a comic book in a long time. But I always said to myself, it's like if I am going to buy a comic book, caveat, for myself. I bought heaps for my kids, for myself. I haven't. But I always said to myself, I'm gonna buy, I'm gonna spend it on someone who's made something independently made, because I'm not gonna. I've given enough money to Marvel and DC over the years. But I
I
think this
greatly
is
appreciate that.
gonna break
I
my
greatly
streak, mate.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.